Shalach Paris, the Pasha teaches us about Kriyas Yam Suf. Klal Yisrael leaves Mitzrayim. They've seen this like never before, but they get to a place where they're stuck. There's nowhere to go. They understand what they want. They understand now that they want freedom. They believe, Moshe, that freedom is achievable, but they don't understand how are they going to overcome an obstacle that's not naturally overcomable. Hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people, men, women, and children, and there's no way to cross. There's nowhere to go. And the other side are the well-armed Egyptians that they're running from. So as we know, the Torah doesn't just teach us what happened in the distant past. The Torah teaches us what's happening. Why is it still happening? Because nobody has figured out how to turn it off. Klal Yisrael has never figured out how to leave Mitzrayim properly. So everything that happened in Mitzrayim, Maaseh Avos and Labonim, we're still there. Whatever damage happened to Klal Yisrael Mitzrayim was never fully repaired. So Yakov Kirsh, the Bechir always, he managed to live 17 years out of his life. He managed to live fully, like a human being was supposed to live. Like HaKadosh Baruch Hu had a mind for every single human being. And then, after he passed and the Shvatim passed, the abuse, the trauma that Klal Yisrael went through, deranged their thinking, violated their spirits in such a strong and extreme way that even though they were seeing open miracles, even though they recognized fully that there's somebody in charge, somebody created this world and he has a plan for it, there's something bigger than what it seems, they still couldn't receive the magnitude of the message and remain embodied. And that's what happened at Matan Torah, that when they recognized what they're really dealing with, it was too good for them. They weren't ready to receive that kind of good. And so they had to, because of their traumatic past, within 40 days, ruin that high level that they realized and go back into exile, go back into slavery of some sort. And although we've had a Beis HaMikdash, and the first Beis HaMikdash we had even Nevi'im, still, none of them were able to convince Klal Yisrael to recognize the true nature of their experience. And that is why the damage that was done in Mitzrayim never left Klal Yisrael. And so the only reason the Torah is telling us about it is to tell us that it's upon us to do what our parents and our grandparents and our great-grandparents didn't manage to finish. Because for thousands of years, we've been trying to recognize something about ourselves, something about humanity, something about the experience of life that's going to make life worth living. That's going to allow people to have access to the energy that was created within them originally when they were born. And as long as we don't have that interpretation of life, life cannot be fully enjoyed. As much as we'll try, as much as we'll comfort ourselves with different methods and different practices in order to find some peace, the Torah tells us that we shouldn't expect to find peace unless we can live in a reality, in a culture that respects what the Creator created and knows how to interact with it accordingly. And this is why David HaMelech says, "Im eshkochech Yerushalayim tishkach yemini." I'm not looking for a small solution. I'm looking for the ultimate solution. I'm looking for the full recognition of what my experience really means Because to the extent that I can have that recognition, not having it is robbing me of everything I came here to recognize and everything I came here to know. It would make my entire incarnation, it would make my entire embodiment feel inadequate, feel like it didn't accomplish the purpose of what it was created to do. And so it's upon each of us, like the Nevi'im call it, Nidrosh as Hashem. The good kings, how does the Navi describe a good king? That he was doirish as Hashem b'chol levavoi. He looked for the truth with all of his heart. He didn't care about anything else but the truth because he recognized that the one who created the truth, he outranks everybody and everything that exists within the truth. And therefore nothing can outrank in authority the very one that created it in the first place. And so when the king was doirish as Hashem b'chol levavoi, then his heart would know how to behave in different circumstances, in different situations. The king was above the law. The king did what he thought right. So if he searched for the truth with all of his heart, if he knew his vulnerability, if he understood how important it is that he should be reconciled with reality, then his decisions would come from a healthy place. Then he would be able to interact with the people and be a king. But as soon as his heart was elsewhere, as soon as his heart was busy with something within creation, and not the very creator, not the very intelligence running all of it, then things would happen and they weren't good. And so eventually, the truth that was available at the time of the Beis HaMikdash was hidden. We don't know that truth. We got a different truth. We got a lower level version of the truth. A version of the truth that allows us to cling to action, to study, to trying to understand, so that eventually our dedication will lead us to a place where we can understand what was hidden, where we can understand the pneumius of what is really being said. And this is because the people, as we were going further and further away from the Beis HaMikdash, were not at the level where they could understand the importance of what's being said. And so to tell people who don't appreciate the truth is worse than allowing them to stay in their ignorance. And this was why Chazal had to hide many different things in the Torah, had to change many different facts, had to create different faces of reality so that the different levels of the people can have what to interact with. There are many different levels of people that the Torah is directed to. And every person understands the Torah in accordance with his own way, his own neshama, and his own level of cleanliness, of purity, of how much he really loves the one who created life, how much he really loves life, how much he really loves the people who live in life. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the totality of our experience. Everything that we experience becomes part of the lens of how we see HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore that lens is what's going to give the meaning to the words that we learn. That lens is going to create the definitions in our minds of the very words that we're saying. And this is how all the generations, even though they were learning the same Torah, they came to different conclusions. They lived different lives. They had very different experiences. And this is because what was happening in their hearts was causing them to see the Torah in a different way. And what was happening in their hearts was influenced by what was happening around them, what was happening outside even of our own communities. And this had a big influence on why the Torah ended up being the way that it is, very distant from its source, very deep in exile. Because when we speak about exile, we're saying that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is distant from Klal Yisrael, but what that really means is is that Klal Yisrael is not understanding the Torah, because the Torah is the one that brings HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Klal Yisrael together. So if we don't understand Torah, then we're distant from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If we understand Torah, then we're very close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The HaKadosh Baruch Hu cannot be distant in space, but he can be distant in understanding. He can be distant in how we feel towards him. He can be distant by people feeling in their hearts that he has their worst interest at heart, that he doesn't want what's good for them. And this is because they've been violated by people. And then they take that violation and they understand that to mean that HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't love them. And so everything that happens to us goes into this relationship that we have with reality and that we have with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So only a person who can be forgiving enough to end up loving this experience, to end up really wanting to help this reality, this world, the lives that are in it, the people that are in it, the neshamas, only then can you really get close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Only then can you eventually merge with HaKadosh Baruch Hu by completely surrendering to what is and allowing the natural divinity of man to shine through him, to shine through his neshama, because that's the way we were created. That was the original plan. That was the original source of who we are. And so when we see ourselves little and we see ourselves defeated, we need to remember that our great-grandparents, they saw open miracles and still they had a difficult time believing. Still they couldn't understand that the one that created life is bigger than us. There's no room for us to question him. Our only question should be trying to understand him. There's no point in questioning what already is. The reality is that he's the creator and we are the created. We have to take that into consideration. And so when we realize the way that life already is, and we start working on accepting it and on loving it, then nothing is impossible, because we don't know what he's capable of. All we've seen is what happens when life gets sabotaged, when we're against it, when we're struggling with it, controlling with it, fighting it. But what does it look like when you actually let it happen? That none of us have seen. And the Torah teaches us that that's actually the spot you want to be. That's the good one. That's the version you want to experience. So when Klal Yisrael comes to the Yam Suf, the Zohar says the Yam Suf represents the Torah. So when a person wakes up from Mitzrayim, he goes out from Mitzrayim, meaning he's woken up from the world of illusion. He's recognized that the things that he imagines outside of him are just in his imagination. He's creating them. He's deciding what to think and when to think and how to think. And so he leaves Mitzrayim, he wants to go different, he wants a new way, and then he finds himself against the Yam Suf. What's the Yam Suf? It's the Torah, a sea of information, and you have no idea what it means. How are you going to cross now? Where are you now? You're running. You know what you're running from, but you don't know where you're running to. And so, how did Klal Yisrael get through the Yam Suf? Moshe Rabbeinu came and prayed to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Ma titzak Eloi, what are you screaming for? Daber al b'nei Yisrael v'yiso. Start writing. Start going. What's there to contemplate over here? We have to figure out what's happening, or else we won't have it. There's no other way. There's no other understanding. Today we're not going to find some book or some place that's going to explain to us reality. The ancients knew things that we don't know. And the only way to figure it out is to understand directly what they're saying, because everybody else is just saying their limited understanding of it. We want to know what the ancients were saying. What did they really want us to know? What was so important for them to tell us that they were willing to die over it? Because these people understood life. These people knew what life means to a certain degree. They understood how it works. And so, Nachshon jumps into the water, He says, we got to do what we got to do. Live or die. If you're working for the Creator, death is not the worst thing that could happen to you. Getting it wrong is much worse. If you're working for your imagination, then death is the worst thing that could happen to you. Because when a person dies, their imagination is over. They stop imagining. But if you are working for the Creator of the universe, death is not your enemy. Getting it wrong is very much your enemy. Not knowing, not being sensitive enough in certain areas, not understanding certain things, can very much cause damage. And so, the goal of Yetzias Mitzrayim is that a person should be able to be kohen chachma. It's not a goal to run away from slavery because, hey, I'm not a slave anymore, I don't have to do nothing for nobody. The goal is that you should be free to help. The goal is that you should be free to understand yourself. The goal is that you should be free to understand how much responsibility is on your shoulder as a human being, as a father, as a mother, as a son, what that really means. It's not what we were told. It's much bigger than that. It's scary how big it is. But it's also very deeply satisfying when we can tune in and we can try to serve that bigger purpose. And so by Kriyas Yamsuf, the Yamsuf split into 12 different lanes. Every Shevet had his own lane. And the same thing in the Torah, every Neshama finds his own lane, finds his own understanding, so that he can understand what's happening to him, so he can find words within which his Neshama can express himself to him, so that he can understand how he needs to adjust, what he needs to change, so that his truth can shine, so that his nature can be the way that it was created to be, so that he can find peace. And that's the ultimate bracha. When we find peace, we gain access to life itself. We gain access to ourselves, and that's the gift. That's the diamond that we were given to make it shine. So we should all be Zochar, Kadosh Baruch Hu should allow us access to our truth, so that our neshamas can shine. And we should see Mashiach Tzidkeinu Me'edim.
In order to get close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we have to understand the Torah. But nobody can really fully understand the Torah.
It's the trying that counts, because as you try to understand it, you get to face questions that otherwise you wouldn't have faced. And as you face those questions, you get to know things about yourself and your nature and your preferences in a very deep way, and you get to realize things from angles that nobody else told you. So the authority of the Torah allows you to go very deep into your inner self and explore, while words that don't have that authority you shouldn't carry into such a deep place, because you don't know the energies that they were created with.
What about for women that aren't educated so much by the Torah? Not all women,
Right.
it's in me, not educated enough for Torah wise.
Right.
So how are we supposed to find God on the same?
Well, what we're doing here is Torah. So, and it has to do with your relationship, so I think it qualifies. But you can also find books that you like and so to so find ways to make life meaningful to you, because in times when life was meaningful to the men, the women found it meaningful enough to run the household. But when men don't understand life, then the women feel like, oh, you guys are out there, maybe we should be out there. It becomes all complicated. It's only because we don't understand the importance of what we're doing that we feel that maybe this is meaningless and that maybe that's meaningless. So technically we don't need to know that much. It's more about being connected, and women have more of an emotional connection to life, and in a certain way it's even easier. So, but at the same time, you should find things that stimulate you so that you feel alive, so that you can renew yourself constantly by challenging your beliefs and your understandings about what's really happening. This is going to give you meaning and purpose and energy.
And also, like you said, to get to know Hashem, right? Is the real deal, right? But so should we get to know ourselves to get to know Hashem?
that's all you can ever get to know is yourself, because Hashem is not available in the sense that we're thinking. Hashem is the source. So when we say getting to know Hashem, we're really saying getting to know His desire. How do we get to know His desire? By looking at what He created. So our entire relationship with Hashem is based on how He created us and what He created. So it's really understanding this that brings us close to Him. And that's ultimately what He wants from us, because then we can be the perfect thing that He created and not be damaged. You know, it's embarrassing when, like we see by Kohanim, that if somebody was a Baal Mum, he shouldn't represent HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because we represent HaKadosh Baruch Hu with the most perfect of creation. That shows how much we see the beauty in what He created, and how our minds and our imagination can be convinced that it is that way. So constantly we're trying to become the best version of ourselves, because that's what He wants from us.
So like, how are you, let's say, living in Israel, let's say like just driving a car, and like people treat you like, they don't like, as soon as they see you're trying to get into a lane, they'll speed up. Just
Right.
like, they're not even driving fast, but they see you're trying to get in, so they're speeding.
Right.
So like, you're like driving, and like, you don't want to, let's say living in Israel, you don't want to be a friar, because then you're going to get eaten alive. So like, you become a product of society.
It's better to be a friar than to have your way, but then have to go through aggravation. You see,
But I'd be aggravated if I'd be stepped on, like, by people, because I'm not
At some
pushing
point-
myself.
No, at some point I
Pushing
think
into line. How many people can go ahead of me till I get my turn? I'm gonna feel like an idiot.
if you start doing it, you're gonna notice that you're not gonna lose that much time. You're gonna actually, if you can keep yourself calm, if it's possible. It's not always possible. You have to work yourself up to it. But once it's possible, you're gonna enjoy your day much more that way, even if it took a few extra minutes, and it doesn't add up to much. Than if you get your way every time, but then you're worked up. There's tension in your system.
Sometimes I actually feel really good getting my way.
You,
I'll be
you
honest.
might, but there's tension in your system, and it's not good for the people who are going to meet you after.
Alright, I'll work on that.
On the one hand, you say like that you shouldn't follow your imagination for anything outside of like your skin. You know?
Only when you meditate.
No, but I
collectively.
mean, like before, you're saying if you follow your imagination, then you're living in your own world, as
Yes.
opposed to like, you know, being a kli for
Yes,
Hashem Shefa.
yes.
So, but there's also like the imagination that, you know, is beyond das, like the amuna of imagination that could take you to the place of Dveikus, and why in that place is Hashem saying to Moshe, Ma titzak elai, like why not daven at that point? Why go in?
Right, because it's a point where there's really no choice. So when there's a choice, the davening is really more for clarification. Like, what am I supposed to do? What would you like? Which direction should I take? What option? But here, what are the options really? You really have to ask. There's only one way. So it's either going to happen or it's not going to happen. What are you negotiating with? There's nothing to negotiate about. So I think that's the nekuda of what he's saying. But in general, the imagination, it exposes you to being manipulated. It doesn't mean that you're being manipulated. It could be you're using imagination only with your cycle, that you know exactly what you're trying to imagine, and you're imagining it, you're creating it, and it's all good. But once you're in your imagination, you're open to being manipulated, because maybe one of the beliefs that is operating within that imagination is false or is misunderstood, and then the whole trajectory goes off. So it's a danger zone. That's why when we meditate for safety, we leave all that, we leave that whole world. We go into that world to build, to live, to operate, to interact. We don't have a choice. But we still have to remember what do we know is real, and what is our opinion about what might be.
You mentioned before about the only way to understand HaKodesh Baruch Hu is you have to understand His desires, and His desires is that He created this world, He created us. So in order to understand that, we need to understand this world, right? You have to understand the world we live in, we have to understand our inner world, our outer world. Why learn Torah then? Just learn nature, learn your inner body, learn psychology, learn all the things on this world, and forget about, the shore that gourds the other shore, or how high the tefach needs to be in the sukkah. Like, what?
So
why
the
go
answer
there?
to that is that we're so far from understanding nature that we don't understand how much there is to know. And so those people knew stuff that not only can't we imagine that they knew, but we don't even imagine that it exists. We don't even know that there's such a concept. And they knew how to stimulate areas in your brain that no matter which college you go to, no matter which type of education you try to get, it's not going to be stimulated in the same areas that the Torah very much needs you to stimulate. Because people today, for example, don't even believe in magic. And people today don't understand the nature of language and how it affects their mind and how it motivates them and how it causes them to run into mental and emotional trouble. So there's a lot of basic stuff about who you are that you can't even be taught today. So the Torah is a way of preserving knowledge, preserving wisdom from people who knew into a world that's going to be so morally corrupt that what they think is good is bad and what they think is bad is good. So the only way to real information is to go back to the ancient people who still loved you.
So you're saying that studying the heights and dimensions of a sukkah, as an example,
yes,
does
has
more to you than studying
everything has in it a
neuroplasticity.
message. If you're going to understand what it means, then your reward is going to be so much greater than anything you could have gotten in college that it makes all of it worthwhile. It makes it worthwhile even that for 1,000 years all your grandparents would learn it, and then only one guy will understand it at the end. It's still worth it.
What do you mean by reward?
Reward meaning that the way that this can fix life and change the human experience is so extreme, is so meaningful, that it will pay off for everything.
If what you're saying is true, then all the people sitting in Koilel and learning all these Gemaras, and they're basically doing the things that we know that certain people who are sitting in Koilel do, why are they not perfect human beings? Why are they not
Because
living?
they don't understand what they're learning. Just because they're learning, it doesn't mean they understand the wisdom of what's being delivered. So just learning Pshat is not going to get you there, because that's not the message. That's the clothing of the message. But the clothing is important, otherwise we don't get the message. But ultimately the understanding is a wisdom that comes from the heart. And that's why the Torah says, if somebody's not learning the Shema, you won't get the benefits. Not only won't you get the benefits, the Torah can become a samamovis, which it is for most people today. Because it's obligations with no reward. They're not getting anything in return for all the energy that they spend. So the Samachayim only starts when a person can get from the Torah more than he gives. And that means understanding the wisdom, understanding the pnimis.
Oh, it's like Zohar. And
Yeah, Zohar was written for this purpose, so that people don't lose the real meaning of the Torah. Because people are at such a level where it's perfectly okay for them that things are random. They don't understand that there's supposed to be wisdom behind it. And so people get to such a place, they're not even going to dig to find the real meaning. They think it's okay, it's random and it's fine.
so why are the Gedolim not promoting this, what you're saying, as opposed to sit and learn Gemara all
I'm not
day?
going to give opinions about other people's opinions, but I can tell you what I've seen written, and I feel that it can help people.
You said something before about with the Cohen, that the Cohen is a Baal Moon. They can't be, I don't know if I understood what you said, that they can't be a representative of Hashem because...
They don't represent humanity to Hashem, because the representative of humanity should be fully perfect in the best way we know how. And that's the way it always was in the times when humanity was still healthy.
It's such a physical thing. We're saying that's...
Yeah, because ultimately the physical and the spiritual are really one. So it's only now that we're in such a low place that we separate the spiritual from the physical. We say, this is the effort that we can make in these generations, and it's not really going to affect how you're born or what's happening. But when people were perfect, when the world was perfect, then if nature made a flaw, it wasn't because nature was flawed, it was because something within the process of how this manifested was flawed. And that only happens through bad spirits. So it would always show that there was some type of a chisaron, there was some type of a lack within the shorish of the thing. And that's not what you bring to celebrate life. So it's supposed to be celebrating with God means celebrating life, celebrating what He created. We don't celebrate by showing something lacking. Today, we don't celebrate without showing something lacking. It means we always show something lacking. For example, by a wedding, we break the course to show that we're not going to be happy, even though this should be a very happy day, should be the happiest day of my life. I'm not really happy because there's no Yerushalayim. So if I don't know the truth, what does it really mean to be married? Am I doing a good thing or a bad thing? I can't even tell. Only when we have Yerushalayim do we know what's what, do we know what's good and what's bad, and which way we're supposed to be. So in the time of Yerushalayim, when somebody was born perfect, this was a sign from the forces creating life that they approve of him. This is how the Torah also describes people in their physical, in the way they looked, and the way they, in their hair, and in their height, and in their eyes, because this is a language that speaks. The spiritual speaks in physical.
Sefer Tzodok was supposed to be very, very beautiful.
Yes.
Which,
Yes. So that's not accurate anymore?
And today, because of the confusion, it's not accurate anymore, because the forces in charge of life are not always good forces. We put bad forces in charge of life, and they hurt good and bad people alike. So right now, the world is not just. The world is not right. So people can be, it's the opposite now, that usually the people who have all the power are the people who are ready to do evil. Because we allow evil to run us, so they get charged. So for example, if we believe that money is the ultimate authority and everything should run around money, so then the people who are willing to do everything it takes to get money, they will be in charge. So we do that with our beliefs and with our thinking. How we look at life causes it to be a certain way. So when we do that, the forces running life are really evil. And this is how so much evil can happen. This is how a Holocaust can happen. It's not because the creator of life wants evil, it's because the people experiencing life create evil.
Was anyone ever perfect? Ever in creation and history?
It's a relative term, but all the tzaddikim were relatively perfect. All the chachamim were relatively perfect.
No one was perfect. There's always something to say, but this one did that, and that one should
That's because we're not there. If we were there, then there would be many perfect people. But because we didn't get there, automatically that tells us that nobody made it yet. So we say, this guy climbed the ladder and he made it to this notch. This guy climbed and he made it this high and that high.
How can we even be compared to like Avraham Avinu and Moshe Rabbeinu?
Because
if they weren't the perfection.
Because Moshe Rabbeinu wouldn't be Moshe Rabbeinu without Avraham Avinu. And so you wouldn't be you. You wouldn't be you without all of them. Meaning, you have the benefit of having them as your ancestors. They didn't have that. So they were big souls, and they needed to be big in order to fight their way out of nowhere. You already have a big support group that believes in these words, that tries to do nice things, that you understand. So there's been a lot of framework done, a lot of building, so that eventually somebody can get there.
So why do they say that there will never be another Moshe, like no one like Moshe? There was never, and there will never be someone like Moshe.
In certain respects, in Nevi'ah there will never be, but in Chachma there will be. Mashiach is going to be smarter than Moshe in Chachma, but less than Moshe in Nevi'ah. So Nevi'ah is a form of experience. There's not going to be another Torah, but we don't need another Torah. We already have now what we have.
I'm saying that's how there will be no one like Moshe Rabbeinu, because there's not going to be another Torah, and he brought down the Torah.
Well, he brought the Torah from somewhere. He didn't make it up. So a lot of people could go there and see that the Torah comes from there. It's not his in the sense that he made it up. It's his in the sense that he had access to it in a way that he can deliver it to us. But the meaning of what he's saying is not currently available to us. So when we have the real meaning, that's when we'll go out of Golus. We know what we're doing, but we don't know what it means. And what it means is the key to getting out of Golus. The doing is just to keep the message going until we know what it means. Once we know what it means, then we'll do it because we know we have to do it, not because it says so.
You mentioned that so money has become one of the things that people have created.
Money is the avodah zarah of today, clearly. People give most of their time and energy to have it, and some of it is legitimate. That's what makes it complicated, is that we do need it in order to exist.
So is it evil now? Has it become evil because we've...
It depends on the individual using it. Money is a tool, it's not a thing. Only people can be evil. Nothing else can really be evil other than people. Nothing else can really be good other than people. So it's people who use things and make them good and bad.